Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Roberts. Today is day 6 of the nationwide Canada Post strike, and workers in Yellowknife held a rally downtown. The group gathered outside the Canada Post office at noon. There were chants and cars honking as they passed. One postal worker says the support from the public has meant a lot to them. Workers are hoping for a fair resolution, but say they'll stick it out on the picket line until that happens.
Depending on how long it goes on, we're willing to do whatever it takes. We're out here at 20 below and, we're still smiling and still going strong. So as long as it takes, we'll be here.
John Parsons is also a Canada Post worker. He described specific difficulties for rural workers who have a different collective agreement. Rural and suburban mail carriers are under the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. Parsons says they'd like to see the unions combine because their agreement is underdeveloped.
And everybody else across the country that works in the plants, they have a good solid collective together, whereas ours is still in the beginning stages over the last, I guess it's been 18 years since we've been employees. Before that, we were contractors that really didn't make much of a living wage.
Staying on the strike, the federal government has appointed a mediator, but the Crown Corporation says there's still a lot of ground to cover before a deal is reached and mail can start moving again. Wages, pensions, and Canada Post's plan to offer 7-day parcel delivery are at the center of the dispute. The trouble is, the longer it goes, the greater the impact on vulnerable Canadians and remote communities. Marina von Stackelberg has the story.
This is where high-priority mail makes its way into the most northern parts of Canada. These planes normally fly into Yellowknife filled with Canada Post letters and parcels. Not anymore.
The Canada Post strike is having a huge impact in northern Canada, and it's monumentally more difficult to move stuff it is than down south.
This is a major and complicated operation. From Yellowknife, small passenger planes transport mail to communities in the Northwest Territories. Some of those places, only Canada Post will go.
It's a huge logistical thing, and Canada Post really is the only people doing it. FedEx, UPS, all these major companies, they have ways to do it, but Canada Post is an essential service for all the communities of the North.
Across the country, charities like the Ottawa Food Bank are missing out on the fundraising they need to do right now through the mail. It's money they'll use for the next year to help vulnerable Canadians.
It's a huge proportion of what we receive.
Most donations come in over the holidays. The food bank still collects millions of dollars by mailing out requests for support.
Even if they are not giving directly through the mail, often the mail that they receive prompts them to go online and make a donation.
While most Canada Post workers are on the picket line as negotiations continue, some are delivering federal government support checks, pension, old age security, and the child benefit.
We make sure, which is something that CUPW and Canada Post has agreed on, and we're happy to do it, because we have to do it, is deliver their mail. So they will receive definitely their welfare.
But most other government support payments are not part of this agreement. So provinces and territories have made arrangements for people to go to their local government offices to pick up their checks. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
The government of Nunavut has responded to a recent report on the state of mental health in Canada. The Canadian Mental Health Association released the report this week. It says suicide and self-harm rates are much higher in Nunavut than the national average. Nunavut's health minister says the government has been trying to combat this, but there's still a lot of work to do.
It's something we know already. Unfortunately, it's all too familiar to us. We live in a territory where everyone has been touched in one way or another by suicide. And, there's a huge need for more supports, for improvements to be made so that we can change those statistics going forward.
Maine says providing cultural care for Inuit is a key priority for the Nunavut government. He took on the health portfolio in 2021, and Maine says since then the number of paraprofessionals providing cultural care has risen from 10 to 40. A paraprofessional is a person trained to assist someone who has a professional designation. 2022 also saw the largest jump in child poverty rates on record in Nunavut. That's according to a new report released by the advocacy group Campaign 2000. More than 1.4 million children are affected by poverty across the country. Nunavut has the worst child poverty rates in Canada. The president of Amautit Nunavut Inuit Women's Association says there are some recent initiatives that could help, like funding from Jordan's Principle or the Inuit Child First Initiative. She says only time will tell how effective they are.
Some people are talking about potentially inflated grocery prices, but we're also hearing people saying that having that guaranteed extra $500 every month gives them a flexibility to prioritize how they want to spend their money, and it means that they have guaranteed groceries at least once a month.
Redfern wants to see the Inuit Child First Initiative extended. It's currently set to end in March of 2025. To the Yukon now, where the BC College of Social Workers has taken what it calls, quote, extraordinary action to protect the public. It suspended a Yukon-based social worker pending a larger investigation. At issue, conspiracy theories. Cheryl Kawaja explains.
Hello, you have reached Deborah Gregg and Hannah Clinical Social Work Services.
Deborah Gregg is still offering social work services. Now, that's despite the fact that her professional registration has been suspended, at least temporarily, by the BC College of Social Workers.
Shock and horror to find that this person is representing marginalized and at-risk people. The idea that she's now representing herself as having retired her clinical designation is to flagrantly misrepresent what she was advised to do by the college.
Concerns came to light when Gregg emailed legal aid in Whitehorse about a mutual client, and she said things like the courts were now null and void. Gregg believes in cult leader Romana Doodle, the self-professed Queen of Canada and follower of QAnon theories. Gregg first got her accreditation from the BC College of Social Workers back in 2007, and now that college is investigating her work. But the jurisdiction of the BC College ends at the BC border, so that means there's nothing they can do about the Yukon here. Yukon has no legislation for social workers.
Liard Aboriginal Women's Society is very concerned about this situation, and as we very much support our vulnerable people, and the fact that we don't have a body for a group of people who are so very important, in particular because it's our most vulnerable who are seeking services of people like Miss Gregg.
She wants the Yukon to step up and get in line with standards, and she's not the only one.
It really reinforced for me the importance of regulation as a method to protect the public. When we talk about practice that can harm, especially in my opinion, in the mental health universe, it can be more difficult for clients, care recipients, patients to know when they've received care that hasn't been helpful or even worse, been actively harmful.
And now, within hours of first hearing about Gregg, the Yukon's Minister of Social Services, Richard Mostyn, says he will create new regulations for social workers in the Yukon. He says that could take some time. So meanwhile, he's warning Yukoners to be cautious, to be vigilant, and to ask questions of healthcare providers. Cheryl Kawaja, CBC News, Whitehorse.
The first occupants have arrived at the GNWT's On the Land camp for unhoused Yellowknifers. 5 people went to the facility over the weekend, and more are being brought in over the next couple of days. The GNWT says as of Tuesday, 42 people applied for spots in the camp. It's about 60 kilometers outside of Yellowknife on the Ingram Trail. It has heated dorm-style cabins, outhouses and showers, as well as a central kitchen. Robert Tordiff is with the GNWT. He spoke about the camp with the CBC earlier.
Well, it's certainly intended for a particular group within the homeless population. Given the distance from the community, we've asked that folks going out there be prepared to abstain from consuming alcohol or other substances while they're there. That's a safety factor for everyone involved. So that will necessarily reduce the number of folks that might be interested in it. But we also know from previous engagements with this population and in the NWT that amongst folks that are unhoused or vulnerable, there's a significant population that are interested in being outside of the downtown core and living in an abstinence lifestyle. Well, it is a temporary solution, and it's really intended to bridge time for us and allow us to come up with a more permanent solution down the road. So we're working on that. We've been working on it simultaneously with coordinating to get the camp up and running. There's still some work and some details that we need to go through, and as we sort those out, we'll be prepared to make an announcement when things are ready then.
Tordiff says people stay at the camp for a week. After that, they can go back to Yellowknife or stay longer.
Donations to the War Amps have a lasting impact on amputees. Today, your support gives them the artificial limbs and resources they need for everyday activities and learning to live with amputation. Having access to our essential programs helps amputees prepare for tomorrow on their road to independence. The War Amps is committed to improving the quality of life for Canadian amputees, but this wouldn't be possible without you. To learn how your donation helps, visit waramps.ca.
This is CBC North on your smart TV because CBC News is now streaming local. Get local headlines, weather, and community notices, plus newscasts and live programming on your favorite connected device, all for free. It's called the CBC News North streaming channel. You can see your community on your connected TV and mobile devices. CBC News North, your local news streaming channel, is now available.
Release him.
Why?
Well, I would say it's extremely bad form to arrest your new boss.
This man is actually in my custody.
What did he do?
Well,
Did you hear that? I'm being charged with,
This ranch isn't going down. Not on my watch.
The Northwest Territories is transitioning into a new way of funding its communities. It's supposed to correct cases of overfunding in some communities, while others were underfunded. With the new model, communities with less than 500 people will be hit the hardest. And as Natalie Pressman reports, bigger ones still say they need more money to properly operate.
We need every little dollar to be able to make those just core projects, that to be able to get the water to your house, to be able to get the sewage pulled from your house, to be able to pick up your garbage and be able to dispose of it properly.
Bigger communities like Yellowknife will see a boost in funding from the new model, but leaders say it's nowhere close to what they need.
You know, we were underfunded $9 million a year. We're getting nothing close to that. It's like a little bit of a top up, but every little bit helps.
The new funding model is based on communities' assets and what they need to fund them. Based on calculations under the new formula, some communities are getting less than 60% of what they need to operate, while others are getting over 100%. The new funding formula is supposed to redistribute those funds to make it more equitable.
Like, we understand that communities are underfunded in general. We understand the cost of living is increasing. You know, all governments are challenged with funding, right? So we get the comments and they're appreciated. But at the end of the day, we're looking to try to make things more equitable across the board, and how we do that is through this policy, right? So
the territory will start rolling out the new funding model in April and will slowly implement it over 3 years. Leaders of small communities say that will help them prepare.
I actually went as far as to reach to some of our field staff to give them heads up. You know, be prepared in the next 5 or 6 months to start looking at ways to help us out, and if we're going to face cuts.
Funding for the communities under the new model isn't yet final. Leaders say they're waiting to see the final numbers before they know how their communities will be impacted. Natalie Pressman, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Yukon's premier responded to some pointed criticism of the mining industry this week. It happened at the Yukon Geoscience Forum. Hundreds of mining delegates are in Whitehorse for the conference. Representatives of the First Nation of Notcho-Nayik-Dun spoke about the Eagle Gold Mine disaster, which was on their traditional territory. They say the territory's new mining legislation is taking too long. That's something the Yukon's Liberal government has promised for years. Yukon Premier Ranj Pillay says the legislation is coming.
We think it's imminent right now that the foundational pieces for new legislation are about to be able to be signed off on. That work's been really fast-tracked over the last 24 months. And we're seeing individuals that have waited for decades to get this progress in place. And as I stated, it is a incredibly technical piece of work because there's 22 First Nation governments that we have a legal obligation to work with and to consult with, not just 14 First Nations in the Yukon. It's First Nations that are transboundary, as well as CYFNs at the table and others. So I think the progress there has been very strong, and I will be respectful of the frustration. I think that frustration is over a period of time, but I know in this moment in time, there's good work being done.
Also this week, the Yukon government revealed that a public inquiry into the Eagle Gold disaster won't happen until next summer. It was originally supposed to take place in the spring. Yukon's ombudsman is recommending a crackdown on campsite saving. Yukon Park says it's tried to put a stop to the practice, but a report from the territory's ombudsman says it's still happening. It happens every summer in Yukon. You roll up to the perfect campsite, but someone has left a tent or a cooler to claim the site as their own. The practice is so widespread, the Ombudsman Office launched an investigation and is calling on Yukon Parks to do more. Officials with Yukon Parks say they accept the recommendations. They also say a new reservation system launched last summer has cut down on complaints.
We have, over the years, had quite high numbers. Say 21, there were 30 incidences, 22 was 26, 23 was 23, but last year there was only 6.
Campgrounds closest to Whitehorse and Haines Junction are the most affected by site saving. Trot encourages campers to use the reservation system next season. The Nunavut Department of Health is advising residents of Igloolik and Sunnyrayak not to eat fermented meat. It's looking into whether fermented meat is causing botulism in both communities. Symptoms include diarrhea, blurred vision, and trouble breathing. People with symptoms should call their local health center. Anyone with leftover fermented meat in Igloolik and Sunnyrayak is asked to contact their regional environmental health officer to see if it can be tested. The First Nations Bank of Canada announced the grand opening of its new community banking centre in Igloolik on Monday. It's the first financial institution in the community. The community banking centre started operations in July. It's renting a space in the co-op. A representative for First Nations Bank of Canada says customers can expect a full range of services like a regular bank.
The community is excited to have the banking services that, they don't have to spend the exorbitant amount to travel down south. So, having a local banking financial institution present in the community, really helps provide the banking services to what used to be an underserviced community.
The counter is ready to serve the community's 2,100 residents. The center is planning to celebrate the opening with community members in the new year. A Yellowknife movie star is melting hearts in his new role as a snowman who comes to life. But we are not talking about Olaf from Frozen here. This is Hot Frosty. Dustin Milligan plays Frosty in the new Netflix film. He sat down with the CBC's Shannon Scott to talk about the role and the very real challenges it presented.
Dustin, hello.
Hello.
So congratulations on this movie. I watched it over the weekend. It's utterly delightful. Every time I log into Netflix, it's in the #1 spot from movies in Canada. right now. How does it feel to be getting all this attention and in this movie that's making a lot of buzz?
Yeah, I mean, for a movie called Hot Frosty, of all things, with a title like that, yeah, I wasn't really sure how it was going to be received, and to have seen it, it was, believe it or not, #1 around the world for the last week, and yeah, was #1 in like dozens of countries on Netflix. It was bizarre. I mean, it is still very a surreal thing. Again, like I said, for a movie that is about a woman who falls in love with a snowman and a snowman who falls in love with this woman. I mean, it is on paper a very silly premise, but I think, what I love about the script is that it does have more to it than just that. There's a bit more depth and heart, and it's grounded a little bit more than that premise would suggest. And I think audiences are picking up on it.
We can't talk about this movie without talking about, the hot frostiness of it. You spend a good chunk of this movie without your shirt on. We have to ask, how'd you get the abs for this role?
Let me pivot around that question. I'll just be totally honest. Like, I understand that that's something that people want to ask about, but not to bring this down or anything, but look, it's very difficult to be that exposed at any rate. Like you said, that was 10 years ago. I lived my life a certain way that allowed for, in this case, I was able to kind of sign on to the movie with only 2 weeks notice and kind of just be ready to go, which the timing worked out really well. But I've also, I've experienced disordered eating and body dysmorphia, and it was actually very difficult in a lot of ways to do this. There was quite a lot of, mental preparation that I had to go through that superseded any other kind of preparation, certainly in the physical sense, where I just had to be so exposed. And in order to, I think, really do this character justice, I had to really lean into that exposure and that vulnerability, because that's very much who this character is. He's unencumbered by any kind of body shame or insecurities that the rest of us in real life live with constantly. And that was a huge challenge. I think it was very liberating to get to play this character and go through all those things. As uncomfortable as it kind of was, there was a freedom that I felt on the other side of it that I'm very grateful for. That being said, yeah, I am trying to avoid, I think, sort of talking about soundbitey specifics about working out and stuff, just because I feel like, as someone who, as all of us, I think, grew up reading these things and hearing about them without the specificity and context of how our own bodies work and what our own journeys are, it's very quickly that they can lead to something kind of harmful. Again, I'm sorry I'm pretty mindful of that kind of stuff. I just think it's more important to just focus on other aspects than that in particular.
No, that's fair, and thank you for sharing that. With only 2 weeks preparation and having that as your history, this couldn't have been necessarily the easiest role to just jump into then either.
Yeah, it was very much something that I there was a lot of consideration and thought that went into it, where I think too there was a level of, like I said, just embracing this opportunity that presented itself and being like, okay, like I can push this away, or I can lean into it and kind of, test myself as far as like what it is that I can do as an actor. And a big part of that in this role was, being totally, like I said, uninhibited by all the things that normally would keep us small and insecure and covered up. And yeah, there's like this unbridled physicality and the physical comedy of this character I just was so excited about. And, thinking of movies like Elf and Splash and like Mannequin and this movie called Clifford with Martin Short. Like, there's just all these wonderful examples of actors who I admire so much that have done versions of this before. And it does require, like I said, just this liberation of self in terms of physically, how exposed you are and how you're moving through the scenes and how loose and free your body is. And it was actually one of the best experiences I've ever had on set in my entire career. But first I had to get over those initial hurdles, and I'm very grateful that I did.
That was actor Dustin Milligan speaking to the CBC's Shannon Scott. Milligan grew up in Yellowknife, and he funds an art scholarship in the NWT. If you've been surfing the web recently, you may have noticed Google Doodle has some new art from Nunavut. Google is showcasing the art to honor Native American History Month. It approached Iqaluit artist Natasha Alakarialak to collaborate on the project. She says she was shocked that such a big company was interested in her art.
Because it's such a big company, initially I thought it was a scam. But I was really honored that they had asked me. I felt a little bit intimidated initially, but they were really supportive, and it was really wonderful, and I'm so happy that it's come to life and people get to see it now.
The image shows a kayak. Alakarialak says it's important people understand the history of the boat. She drew inspiration from old photos from the early 1900s taken in Greenland and Nunavut. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. We leave you tonight with some highlight footage from this afternoon's Challenge Cup. The annual hockey game sees Yellowknife's two high schools go head-to-head. The girls' game was won 8-1 by Sir John Franklin, and then Sir John also won the boys' game with a final score of 9-3. But hopefully everyone had fun. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.